And we are live. Welcome, every one of you. And by that, I mean the one of you that is watching live. Um, let me know who's watching in the comments. Just say hello so we know who we are chatting with. Without further ado, I will bring him on because he's been on before. He needs no introduction. Greg Shaw, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good. Thanks again for having me on. It's great.
Thank you for being on so that I'm not just rambling and sort of talking to myself, essentially. which
Oh, my pleasure.
um which I'm pretty good at. I got to admit. Like I think I do an okay job even when when
Oh, you
there's
do a great job. Between
even
this and the Joe stuff,
nobody to
you like
interact with.
fill up the air. Yeah. No, it's awesome.
It's it's one of those things where like if it felt like a job, if it felt like it was something I didn't want to do, it'd probably be a lot harder. Um but the amount that I want to talk about these things, it's like it's hard to fit it in the hour that we kind of allot.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, if one day, the ever decisions ever made to sort of like expand these into like a panel when you have like, three or four or whatever, then it's between going off the rails and between getting into the weeds, like I mean, you could roll for hours, right? So
It's
yeah.
hard not to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the couple times that we did these with more than two people,
Mm.
like I think when we did the one with Trevor, I think that one went close to 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think we did another one that went close to 2 hours too.
Well, there was
Um,
one I remember, one of the early ones, like was you, Ray, Patty, and it was great actually. It was really good because, like,
yeah.
honestly, when it comes to streams, the more the better because it just becomes like you're a fly on the wall to a
Mhm,
bunch of guys sitting around the bar having a really good conversation, right?
mhm.
And that's just something that everyone wants to be a part of. So
For sure, man.
yeah,
I agree completely, and and then you also sort of get too when there's more people involved. You get sort of the guy who's kind of controlling everything, and then you tend to get sort of a straight man, funny man, just by coincidence. Like you just start getting people's sort of true characters coming out in a way when they're just
totally,
sort of a part of a bigger conversation, not sort of doing the whole thing. So
totally.
I'm sure we'll have more like that. I'm sure we'll have more that like that. Well, just that we're waiting on schedules to line up, and we're waiting for
Yeah.
folks to sort of.
Well, I think too. The other thing is like most of you guys are about 5-10 years my junior, so a lot of you guys are in sort of like the early kid days. And like Ray's got like two little ones home, and you've got little ones and other things on the stove, and so like like that's a lot of pressure on the time. So but once things start rolling and like that, yeah, hopefully everyone can sort of get in the rhythm that allow them to do
Mhm.
some more things. So
Yeah, so Kelly, I got Greg on, so I kind of threw a curveball. Greg's got to be in bed by 9 p.m. So we had to wake him up to get him and nights isn't the same if we did it even earlier. So that's sort of the unfortunate situation.
it's
Us
very
on
true.
the West
It's very
Coast,
true.
yeah, I mean, I'm looking outside. It's a little cloudy here, but it's still clearly daytime outside. Still sunny in on the island there for Kelly, but yeah, we kind of we're jumping back and forth. There's sort of the 6:30, 7 o'clock, or we do it at sort of the nine. What time are we doing on the West Coast? 8 p.m. So 11 p.m. for the East. Well,
Hmm.
Ontario. I guess that's not East Coast. I mean, if you're East
Yeah,
Coast, it's even later than that. But
yeah. And actually, that I think, just to circle back to what we were just talking about, that probably works better for a lot of the guys with the younger kids because they're in bed by that time, right? So
yes,
that's everything too. So yeah.
yeah, it's not easy to get these things coordinated. It's not easy to get everybody sort of in the same place. We're not on the same schedules, not just because of like kids go to bed at different times, but between me on the West Coast and those guys on Ontario time, and then sort of other people in different spots. It's never perfect, but we try and we have a good time, and that's sort of the point. As you mentioned, Greg, kids. I've got two girls, as if anybody's watched, probably already knows. I've got two girls. I got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And next week I will be adding to the flock, as it were. Great segue into that. I won't be doing videos for the month of May. So there may or may not be regular scheduled videos. As I was saying to Greg before we started, if something comes up, if there's a big announcement, I'm sure I'll jump on. It'll be hard to stop myself from doing it, but as it stands now, I'm kind of taking a step back for the month of May, and then we'll be back, bigger and better and brighter, and we got some cool things lined up though too. I got to say, I've got a few people lined up to do interviews with, which is going to be really really fun. Nothing set in stone, so I don't really want to divulge too much. But big plans lined up. So,
Right
um,
on.
Jim, good evening. Your name is gonna come up later, buddy. Just to, just so you know. Kelly says, enjoy the time off. I absolutely will. I'm really, really excited. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, we have 2 girls and we're having a boy next week. So um, that'll sort of balance things out in the household, hopefully. At least
Oh man, yeah, wishful
not
thinking.
right away. Anyway, let's get into it. There was a couple little bits of news, nothing nothing crazy. The first thing was Four Horsemen did Four Horsemen o'clock and showed some more of the production samples for Alithia. So last week they showed production samples of the, I mean, I don't know how they call it, like the basic figures, the ones that didn't have
Yep.
soft goods. This week they showed some of the figures with soft goods. So they showed Alithia, Baron Volgar version 2. They showed Varg, is that his name? The vampire bat guy.
Yeah, I believe so.
Um, and Alithia's mount, which looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting closer and closer. Alithia should be shipping soon. I think they were kind of saying, like June, July, August, just depends on
I
time.
think that's what Mike was saying. He was hoping for fulfillment maybe in like July. So yeah.
It's getting close. That'll be like the first real wave that I'll be sort of around for.
Oh
Um,
really? Oh,
yeah,
I guess that's about right. Yeah.
yeah, I got, a few bits and pieces from Arethyr. I got some reinforcement, but I wasn't really quite sure, how deep down this rabbit hole I was gonna go. Um, I I'm getting virtually all of the Alithia wave, and a couple doubles as well. So I'm looking forward to that delivery for sure.
It's so funny. I've heard you say that several times. Yet, in the Facebook group, I'll see like this sort of like slow but steady accumulation of grails on your part. Like they just keep popping up. It's like like score, score. I'm like, oh man, he's so far down that hole. It's yeah.
Well, admittedly I've been very lucky. I've had a couple people sort of reach out. I've been fortunate enough to sort of know people that sort of have some of the things that I'm looking for, um, and have been sort of more than willing to do trades for the most part, which has been
Mm,
shocking because I mean, new to the line, I got a couple random things here and there extra, um, and it's just worked out that I've had stuff that people have wanted and vice versa, and
it's great.
yeah, I mean, Elf Ranger is probably the next guy on my list to the top of my list right now are probably Elf Ranger and Vorgus. Those are sort of the two that are sort of like most that I would most like to get in my hands.
Yeah.
Vorgus, I'm like, I mean, if it happens, it happens, but because
It's a
price,
shame because I had two Elf Rain Rangers that I sold off like 6 months ago.
it'll come up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny because like in a weird way, like a lot of this has sort of just happened naturally and organically, and this stuff has popped
Mm,
up. Um, I'm not, I mean, like I just said, I got 2 kids and one more on the way. I'm not
mm.
looking to like shell out the money that some of these figures
No,
are worth. And
no.
thankfully for the ones that I've gotten, I haven't had to, um, which is why I say like, you know, what's the expression? All good things come to they that wait.
Mm,
So patience, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for, um, the right offer, the right sort of circumstances, and so on and so forth. There's so many great figures, and there's so many great lines, which is what we're going to
mm.
talk about tonight. That it's not a sprint. It's
Yeah,
it's it's and I mean I've been very lucky to get a lot of really great figures really quick.
yeah.
Um, I'm anybody that knows me from the GI Joe group knows that I'm always optimistic, and I'm always sort of I'm very much a glass half full kind of guy.
Mm,
I don't think about the figures that I don't have because I have so many great ones on the shelf. I'm
right.
very happy to have what I have, and I play with them with the kids, and insist that they play very gently in some cases. Um, but for me, they're toys. Ultimately, they're
Yeah.
toys, and I'm not. They're not precious objects. They're not collectibles. I know that there's probably going to be people that are triggered by me saying that like we play with these like they're toys. They fall over, and things fall off and whatever. It is what it is. That's why I'm buying them. That's what I'm into them for. So shelling out crazy amounts of money for them just isn't in the cards for me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
my like I said, Vorgus and Elf Ranger are the two that I want the most.
Mm,
I'm gonna patiently wait to see if we get Elf Ranger in that All Star wave as like a sneaky little sort of addition.
yeah.
Um, and if not, then maybe I'll start sort of actively hunting the Elf Ranger. But other than that, there's so many figures coming between the Alithia wave.
Well, well, yeah. I mean, and that's like, you see so many posts, both in our group, and then in the cabal and stuff where you have people who are manically searching for like, the older stuff, all the stuff from first Kickstarter all the way up. And I, I mean, I've said this several times before. Outside of maybe about 5 or 6 figs out of all of them that I have, I would trade them all if you gave me full runs of the next 3 waves.
Right.
Like hands down. Like I wouldn't think twice. It's like, here you go, enjoy the great, here's your Heaven's Brand, here's this, enjoy, have all this because the stuff that's coming is so good and the quality is so good. And like, yeah, I mean, but again, for me, like being a photographer, or well, I still hate calling myself a photographer. Being an aspiring photographer, right?
Being somebody that
Um,
shoots a lot of pictures.
right, exactly. The newer stuff, you can't beat it. Like, yeah, you can get great shots, the older stuff, but the newer stuff, like the soft goods, the paint apps, it's glorious. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't get my head in that sort of, you know, got to get them all kind of thing. It
Mhm.
doesn't compute for me. But I mean, some people that's their gig. Cool, that's fine. But in this line, you're kind of setting yourself up for some heartache. If that's why you're here.
Or bankruptcy.
Yeah, that too. Thank you, Charlie. It's kind of you. Very
Charlie,
kind.
yeah, you're a photographer. Don't sell yourself short. I would agree. I mean, that's I read I read a short little article actually recently that was talking about photographers, not toy photographers, but photographers in general, and just sort of like talking about how like so many of the don't take this the wrong way, Greg. I'm not necessarily comparing you to some of these people, but
Yeah.
some of the best photographers that that sort of people look at and they go like, how, what, like their eye was just incredible. Like, how did they get this? Why did they, what was the thought process to get this from this angle, whatever. Some of those people were not famous when they were doing it. Some of them got no notoriety. Some of them, people even looked at and thought like, yeah, it's not really anything special.
Yep.
Um, it's a passion. It's something that people do. You're
Yep.
passionate about it, and if you're doing it for that reason, I think the end result is typically going to be good.
Yep.
Whether
Exactly.
whether you think it is or not. I mean, I think we're all our own worst critics. So,
Yep. Yeah.
but
And it's like amazingly fun. And that's the best part, right? It's just so much fun. So yeah.
well, that's just it. And I gotta say, I definitely agree with Charlie. I think some of the stuff that you're coming up with is fantastic. So,
Oh,
um,
thank you. Thank you. That's
but let's
super
not
kind.
get
Yeah.
carried away.
Yeah.
Um, Kelly said all the moose. Jim said moose and goat are going to be awesome. Yeah, and I agree with you. Greg, the
Mm.
soft goods, some of the new sculpts, some of the new armor,
Oh, yeah.
some of the stuff that's coming out. I'm late to the party, but I mean, part of the reason that I'm late to the party is Wave One was they did a great job with sort of
Mm.
reuse and sort of repaints and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then by the time Advent of Decay came around, I was very interested, but it
Yeah.
didn't fit anything that I had on my shelves. And then when I saw the Aether wave, when I saw the Alithia wave, when I saw the Poxus wave, um, they're just getting better and better. And there's just so
Yeah.
much more. There's more diversity in terms of the figures. There's more diversity in terms of the design, in terms of the parts, in terms of all that kind of stuff. And then the fact that it's all interchangeable still
Hmm.
is amazing. Um, I can't wait for this stuff to come out. Um, on sort of another newsworthy note, Jeremy Gerard in Mythic Conversations did mention he just kind of dropped it in there, and I don't really know that a lot of people sort of realized, or I don't know how many people watch it. I mean, I'm passionate about this line, and so I'm sort of following all these things, right? So Four Horsemen mentioned, that they had all the production samples, and so the timeline is quickly sort of coming upon us for delivery. Um, but Jeremy said, um, to paraphrase, that the pre-order for All Stars 5 will be at the end of July, but he didn't say that that's when they would announce who the winners were. And I
Mm.
was like, wait, didn't I thought did they not say that, or did we just sort of interpret that like they would announce it as it was sort of a pre-order? Like,
I think if I remember how the All Stars have worked before, they kind of do it as like a double punch. So they'll announce who won, what the selection is, and then normally within about 2 days the pre-order starts.
mhm,
So usually they make usually they kind of make it like it's almost kind of like what Hasbro does right now. Like
right.
they'll have a release and then the pre-order goes up for it. So from what I remember from the last two All Stars, I think they did something like that. And they do the same thing they've done for this one is they show the narrowing down of the field from the votes.
Mhm, mhm.
But then they're still like a third of the wave that is their own choices and whatever. So
Well, and they
yeah.
keep saying too that this is a special wave, so maybe we'll get an announcement of who won the All-Star vote, but we won't get an announcement of who else is in the wave. Maybe they'll be like, okay, and here's 4 All-Stars, but the wave is 6 or 8 or
Yeah, like
seven
the
figures.
last time they did announce the winners of the vote like a good deal ahead of announcing the whole wave. Like it was like weeks ahead.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like that may be right. Like we may get news sometime in May when I'm not doing videos that announce the All Stars, and so maybe I'll be pulled in for that. But um, we'll see. I mean, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I had just sort of assumed that we would sort of learn who won the vote when we sort of saw the wave. That it felt to me like that was what was insinuated in terms
Mm.
of how they were sort of phrasing
Now
it. But
now mind you too, with now Jeremy sort of running a heavy marketing voice there, they could change it up. Because beforehand, like Four Horsemen has always said, we're just four guys, like
yeah,
basically blundering our way along. right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's how some of those releases were done. Like they're just throwing it out and like hoping it works and hoping things come together. But now that sort of you have Jeremy, who's got like the 40,000 foot view, I think
Yeah.
we could see some changes and some more deliberate marketing and timing. So that's probably on its way, and this could be the first of that.
Could very well be a
Yeah,
sign of things to come. This could be
yeah,
sort of a shift in terms of how they do it.
yeah.
Um, this is sort of the first time I'm sort of involved in this. So to me, it's sort of, it's all fun. It's all interesting. It's all, I'm not, I'm not like, the vote isn't the way it's supposed to be. Like it should have been like this. Like, are we getting new figures? Oh, that's cool. I'll take them. I probably don't have. It's easy, right?
Well, what's really cool about this, and about especially even on this topic, how they're handling news now, because that Jeremy is there, is that it's like for those of us who are really sort of not just into the line, but we also are interested in the mechanics of how the toy industry works.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's from releases to production to all this kind of stuff, they're keeping that transparent too.
Mm-hmm.
So often, like when you have like the Hasbro's or the McFarlane's, McFarlane's a little more transparent, but Hasbro sort of plays it close to the chest as far as like what their marketing plan is and how it's sort of relating to the production and to the release of information. But it seems that with Jeremy, he's keeping the Four Horsemen's sort of like share everything within reason philosophy to apply to the marketing and the production side of it too, which is cool, for all of us who like that kind of thing, because it adds another layer to
Yeah.
interest, right? To how to enjoy these things, not just the final product, but the process. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I think they do the test shot sales, and they
yep,
sort of share they share that um that inside baseball type knowledge, right? Where
right.
it's they're happy to sort of go over anything that's sort of interest to people, and as it turns out, everything is of interest to some of us, right? So
Yep.
it's like, oh, what kind of plastic did they use? What's the durometer of the plastic? What
Yeah.
are you gonna, is it ABS or a whatever, like
Yep.
it's fascinating to me, for so many reasons. But as somebody that's loved toys his whole life, and as somebody that's always been fascinated by, like, why do some toys last and some toys fall
Yep.
apart and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot more to making toys than just like,
Yeah.
yeah, you just send in a design and they just send you the product and that's it.
And it's truly, for me as a writer and like a marketing nerd, like that whole other side of it, when you start to get into the mythology of it and how they try to have sort of the series by Bible, how it applies
Mhm.
to the designs, and it actually directs the designs. That stuff is fascinating to me, because to me it's like, why are we still buying stuff from the 80s? 35 years later, why are we still doing it? Well, there's lots of reasons. They're great toys, but no, it's like it's a spectrum of reasons as to why. A lot of it has nothing to do with the plastic. It has to do with all the other stuff that's
Yes.
around it, right?
Yes.
And tonight when we get into this I think is one of the interesting things about Animals of the Warrior Kingdom, what they're doing. So we'll get into that. But
We might, who knows? um Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's saying otherwise. Kelly says often the best shots are accidental. I think we're sort of talking about, Greg,
very,
your
very
pedigree.
much so. Very
Jim,
much so.
I've never seen a bad shot from you, Greg. So that's
Thank
and
you.
like I
Yeah.
said, I agree. It's all good. But what we decided to kind of chat about a little bit tonight, Greg, was lines that sort of cross over, sort of into the mythic, or potentially the cosmic sort of realm, if you will. And here's sort of the here is our dealer, if you will, guy the guy keeping us on the hook for sure for a lot of this stuff. Shout out to Mike at eCollectibles. We are going to be showing his website quite a bit because by default, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is on there. So it was a quick and easy way to sort of get it sort of on screen. But there's a bunch of lines that are either up or upcoming or sort of in the works that work really well. Whether it's in our group, whether it's in the Cabal, lines that people are talking about in terms of how they're going to fit in with their Mythic Legions, or in a couple cases that we'll sort of get into their cosmic stuff. Greg, what lines do you sort of think of, or is there lines sort of coming up that you're excited about to sort of intermingle into your shelves, into your photography?
Well, I have a prop. Probably something that a few of us have gotten if they've bought any customized parts.
Oh, I forgot that you had this. You're gonna show off now.
Yeah.
You got
But yeah, it's nothing special that I have, because as far as I know, everyone who's bought something from MAFC, I think would have got one of these. I think if you were a big purchaser of their stuff, I think you got this and then like a certificate and whole other kind of thing.
Yeah. So for anybody that sort of doesn't know or isn't aware, that is that is a coin from William Robert Post's line Savage Crucible, which is upcoming. That is a dwarven coin. That is in fact metal, is it not?
It is. It's like a pewter kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually
it's very cool.
They're pretty legit. Jim, we'll get there. Because of you, Jim, we are going to talk about that. Kelly says that's a pretty savage prop. Oh, well done. Charlie said Storm Collectibles and Savage Crucible. So a couple people are already sort of on that Savage Crucible train. We've seen a couple sort of samples. We've seen sort of an articulation video for one of the figures. If you go to their website, which I think is just savagecrucible.com.
It is, yep.
You can see all their 3D concept art. You can see the maps too. Those maps, have you checked those maps out, Greg?
Yeah, they're really neat. I think, to me, it looks like they've used, they may have used, at least for a basis, there's a free software company who does D&D maps. And you can create your own and stuff like that, and they're really good. So it looks, some of the elements are very similar to that, but it's gorgeous. It's really nice.
It seems to be like a perfect complement to Legions. I mean, it remains to be seen sort of what figures we get, when we get them, how much they cost, all that kind of stuff. But I think everybody that I've talked to is pretty excited about that line, and is pretty sort of excited about the fact that it's sort of filling some gaps, so to speak, in the sense that there's lizards and more animals, and different sort of characters. There's this sort of octopus. There's the different elements sort of brought in. The art looks great. The articulation looks great. They're sort of shooting for the same price point. So I think it's gonna be easy to slot those in.
And there's an interesting point, which for us as purchasers and collectors, and particularly for the customizers, is that, and this is what I wonder, and I think this has kind of been a point of minor controversy too. Because right now, as we know, My Action Figure, they make parts that are Mythic Legions compatible. Yes. So great, it's really nice. Now, it only makes sense that they're going to be making parts that are Savage Crucible compatible. Mm-hmm. So if you now have parts, like if there's something's compatible to both, is it stepping on the toes of four horsemen. Like, and I think that was, kind of the thing. But that all aside, let's just say they meet privately and shake hands and do all that stuff because they seem to know one another, and it's fine. But from our point of view, imagine how cool that would be, right?
Yeah.
If you could like swap that stuff up, it'd be awesome, right? It'd be so cool. But
I
yeah,
That's what I thought too. I have heard that they won't be sort of 100% compatible, like the
yeah,
way that like all 1.0 Mythic Legions figures are essentially compatible. You can pop the arms, you can pop the legs, and it's all interchangeable.
right.
My understanding is just because of the articulation scheme that they don't quite work the same way.
Yeah.
But my feeling is that it's probably going to be like, armor and accessories and maybe even like heads. I could
Even
see
just the heads, would be awesome. Yeah, would
exactly.
be awesome. Yeah,
Exactly. And I mean, you got to think that if even some of the aspects are interchangeable or sort of fit,
yeah,
then scale wise, they're probably going to be
yeah,
bang on.
yeah,
So, in terms of fitting Savage Crucible figures into your shelf and them not looking out of place, I think that's sort of the genius of that brand.
yes, yeah. I think
Um,
so.
and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that line. Another line that is already out, that I think sort of fits fairly well, that I think some people are already using. I don't know if I don't know how to pronounce this brand, so I'm hoping that
Mhm.
you might. But the
Zek,
the
Zexray.
X-Ray Studios
Yeah,
combat line, I
yeah.
for some reason I thought it was X-Ray, but they'd like spelt X.
I don't know if it's supposed to be like Xerxes.
Oh,
So I'm not quite sure myself, and it's actually a Chinese company, so I'm curious as to
so
how
it
they
could
pronounce
be
it.
anything.
Yeah, but yeah, no, this I haven't. Yeah, actually, I have mixed them because I mixed them with Vitus
Yeah,
for
yeah,
shock.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, and I've got yeah, I just did one actually. I just did the Praetorian last week,
Oh
and
yeah,
actually it's now the banner on Mike's site,
yeah.
um, along with some graphics and stuff. But yeah, yeah, no, they're fantastic. The articulation's a little bit less, I would say, but mostly that's especially for the Praetorian. The armor holds it back. The gladiator is a little more um, posable. But the thing with these guys is that they're very much more of a heroic buck. They're not as sort of like I think legions more or less. They're not as they're not as over exaggerated. They don't have kind of that Jim Lee sort of like
Okay,
thing to them. But I mean, for these, like the males for sure. But then you get into the females. Like the females don't really float my boat because they kind of look like Street Fighter kind of types, right?
right.
For the most part. And I wish they were sort of a little less, you know, voluptuous in
Yeah,
their shaping. But
a little.
yeah, no, they're really really good. They're high quality figs, great paint apps. That Praetorian is gorgeous. Like it's the detail on it is lovely. Like it's really good.
Now, do you have this one or the one with the alternate head?
I've got them.
The gold head or the silver head?
The comes with the silver, I think. Yeah, I don't have that guy. I have the guy who comes with yeah,
This guy. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So he's like that guy. But all the different like detail on his armor, and like the shield and everything else. And for the gladiator, the 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 armored thing with like it's got the eagle head, and then it has the scales, and each one of the scales is individually painted like underneath the scale. Like they're beautiful figures. They did a
Yeah.
wonderful job. So if you have any of sort of the Roman based mythic legions, they're like a perfect complement to them. And I just hope they if they ever do a Spartan or a hoplite, oh, like it's gonna be madness. People are gonna go crazy because everyone buys Spartans. No matter what, they'll buy the Spartan. It doesn't matter what it is. So
That's yeah, and I mean that's it's I kind of go in the other direction, as is very very well sort of documented in any time I talk. Um, the Spartan stuff, the knight stuff, it's like it doesn't do it for me in the same way that the sort of the more fantastic fantasy based animals and lizards and all that kind of stuff.
yep.
So to that end, um, I'm I'm really excited for Animal Warriors of the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've sort of gone back and forth. The weird thing is, like, for me, I don't know if these are sort of a perfect fit for my mythic shelf. I think some will slot in a little bit better than others. There is a little bit of an element of these because they're based on a comic book, because they've got a
Yep.
comic book line, and they're actually planning to do a cartoon series.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the aesthetic of these sort of is in line with that. But man, I love these figures.
Yeah, yeah. I think these are going to be really, really great. And I've watched some of the articulation test
Mhm,
shot
mhm.
videos and stuff. And of course, with anything like especially if like a simian line, they have to move.
Yeah,
They have to really be able to move well, and it looks like they do. So yeah, I think that these are going to be really really good. But like you said, for legions, the ones that I think will fit in the best probably will be the apes, just because like Mythics hasn't made. And they've made the tigers and all that kind of stuff, and the different felines. But the apes, like they haven't made anything like this. And for me, I want like three of those guys that you have there now, and then they're general, because like the one to sort of go a little bit off topic, the one thing I was really sad about with the Black Panther movies and how they handled it in the MCU is that they never had the white ape tribe, right? So they had like Killmonger, but they never actually had this this tribe of people, and this guy who was basically an enormous, almost part ape himself. He wore like the ape cowl and all that kind of thing. But there's something about like a bloodthirsty, enormous silverback is like horrifying, man. Like they'd be so cool. And if anyone has seen Gennady Tartakov's series Primal, um, he's the guy who did Samurai Jack and stuff like
yeah.
that. But Primal is just like 9 episodes of total metal. It's
Mm.
awesome. It is unbelievably awesome. It is violent beyond belief, but there are apes in that thing which will give you nightmares. But it is so good. And whenever I see these guys, that's what I think
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Mike at E Collectibles, will the armor sets work for Mythic though? I don't know. I kind of hope so. I think they'll be. It remains to be seen, but Mike, as you very well know, I'm gonna have a whole shelf full of these sooner rather than later. So
Actually, well, the thing is, whenever I see these, like, I mean, to me, they look like the perfect shoehorn to Thundercats, right? Is where they seem to fit best.
yeah. Well, I wonder too that you bring up Thundercats, so like the Super 7 Ultimate Thundercats
Yep.
scale almost perfectly with these.
Yep.
And I wonder if this will almost sort of bridge a gap in a way, where, um, because I do see some, different people approach their collections differently, and some people are more particular that sort of everything on the shelf looks similar, and some people are more, sort of not creative or imaginative, but they're sort of more open to sort of different things like that, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and um, I think I'm just looking at my Super Sevens Lion-O on my shelf. I think that those have sort of less of a cartoony look than the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom stuff, but they sort of look very similar aesthetically, apart from maybe the face,
Yep.
and some of maybe the hands and the feet on the Animal Warriors are a little bit more exaggerated and a little bit more, cartoony, so to speak.
Yep.
But I think they're gonna jive pretty well. Like, I think
I
once you
think so.
get them, because let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that shouldn't really work that sort of do, right? When you mix,
Yep.
different lines, something. Well, I mean, as a photographer, toy photographer, you probably know this. You probably sometimes pull stuff and you're like, I don't know, and you put them together and it works. Sometimes it just
Yep.
works.
And
Um,
it's actually like it's kind of it's one of the things that I use to determine my purchases because God knows we all need like some sort of like handbrake, on our on our on our wish list.
oh, we
Otherwise,
like to.
the kids will have like nothing but cavities and no hope of ever going to college. Um so yeah, like whenever I'm making a purchase of either a line or even an individual figure, it's left for very rare things. My cutoff is that it has to be used with at least two other lines outside of its own.
Okay.
Because that's kind of the only way I can justify the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at these, like I just kind of try to think forward because I look at these and think, okay, yeah, sure they can look great once themselves, but could they be Marvel Legends? I'm kind of, yeah, Savage Land, yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Could they be Mythic Legions? Again, probably more the Simian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Can probably work more there. And yeah, and I think there's a lot of people who actually do that. Like for those of you who watch Mazings, Darius Prince, who's in Cabal as well.
Yeah.
Um, when you watch his stuff, that's all he talks about. He's like, when he's reviewing a figure, he's like, it can go with this, it can go with this, it can go with this. He's like, it's because he says, don't forget, this is all about having fun. And when
Mm-hmm.
you were a kid,
Yes.
it's not when you're a kid. Star Wars guys didn't often stay with Star Wars. You mixed in GI Joe, you mixed in this, you mixed. And it's the same thing. And I
Well,
think that's where stuff like this will work.
yeah, and I mean it's funny that you say that too, because like the mixing lines as a kid and not really thinking anything of it. The weird thing that sort of is just this amazing sort of blessing to us as people that are a little bit older, that sort of grew up when there was no such thing as like a standard scale.
Yeah,
Every line was a different scale, and so you had to be even more sort of imaginative, or sort of let this sort of artistic license, sort of adapt different things to different scales and different sizes.
yeah.
But I mean, I got a couple of the vintage Thundercats, on one side. I've got vintage GI Joes on the other side. Those didn't
Oh
work
yeah,
really well, when I was a kid, because their scales were so different. Now we've
yeah,
got GI Joe Classified and the Ultimates, of the Thundercats. They're pretty close.
yeah. No,
Mythic
totally.
Legion, Savage Crucible, Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. Even some of the McFarlane stuff, if it's not sort of a human, right? You can kind of get away with their 7-inch scale.
Yep.
Like, it's all pretty close now. It's all pretty easy, and especially if you're sort of placing them far enough apart or at the right angle or whatever, they don't really look like they're out of scale.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, they don't. They don't. I
so
mean, like the one shot I did for Star Wars, after I think it was, yeah, Book of Boba Fett. They were talking about the Night of a Thousand Tears or whatever. And yeah, I mean those were like the stuff in the foreground was 6-inch and the stuff in the background was like 3 3/4 quarter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you can. When it comes to photography, there's a lots of stuff with scale. Now, as collectors, yeah, it gets a little harder. If you're looking at just for shelf presentation. But I see a lot of people who they do a great stuff where they kind of still group it in. They kind of like put a big version at the back, small version at the front. So yeah, I think that it can all work. But again, these are all sort of like artificial. They're artificial lines that we draw for ourselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you can mix any of this stuff. You can mix. If you scroll through Mike's site, you can pick out 5 different figures, and you can pick out like the Fugitoid, Count Dooku, a Valaverse guy, whatever. You put them all together. Hey man, if that's your dream team, yeah, go for it. It looks great to me.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but to be on topic for tonight though, I think that all this stuff will even if you don't use it with your Mythic Legion stuff, I think if you like Mythic Legions, these lines will bring you joy, whether
Yeah.
you enjoy them together or separately.
Yeah, absolutely. Facebook user, who I'm going to assume is Jay.
Yeah,
I wish I could feel a little bit more free about mixing diverse lines and IPs. Fair enough.
that's actually Trevor Williams.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. That's not who I thought it was at all. But moving on to another line now. This one is for me maybe more of a cosmic tie-in. So this is another line that Mike has. Invincible Toys is doing the futuristic
Yes.
Fat Soldiers.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about this, like I keep hearing people talk about this with Mythic Legions, right? With Cosmic, they're like, oh, I want, all the Mythic Legions sort of characters or sort of types in Cosmic, and Invincible's doing that. They've got sort of the futuristic Spartan, they've got the futuristic cowboy.
The cowboy is kick ass, man. That thing is so cool looking.
The cowboy, yes. He's got the hat, but he's sort of got the breather, and he's got the cape, and then the gun.
It's Brave Star. Come on.
It's pretty badass. Like I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
And you're getting sort of all these different genres just sort of mixed into this sort of sci-fi futuristic. I mean, I'm very interested to read this comic. I've read the first issue of Animal Warriors, and it's fantastic. This is going to have a comic line that goes along with it as well, which I think will be really, really cool. But yeah, you get sort of the gladiator, you get sort of the Wakandan warrior, the Plains warrior. You get the ranger, which is, I guess, equivalent to like the elf ranger, but in a futuristic sort of ranger. So another really, really cool line. You even get the samurai, which Mythic doesn't even have, but sort of the futuristic samurai. Future samurai is one of those characters that's just such a cool combination.
Yes.
There's like a old worldness to it, and sort of a secret, sort of unknown, mysterious quality. And then when you put it in sort of a dystopian,
it's also like the future samurai also has ties to like the cyberpunk kind of thing too, right? So yeah.
And so yeah, for all the people that are sort of saying, "Oh, I want some humanoids with my Cosmic Legions," I think this line is it. I think this is a great looking line. Mike was watching. Mike, is there an ETA for this line? That was the one thing I didn't know about this one. But Charlie said the other thing is the need to go all into a line. Sometimes we forget we can just grab one or two that work for you, like Storm Collectible Skeletons, as opposed to the whole Golden Axe lineup. Yes, absolutely. And that, maybe you just want the samurai from this line. Maybe you just want a couple of the apes from Animal Warriors. Maybe you just need, one wolf from D20's line. This was another one that these things are awesome.
They are. Yeah.
I when I was sort of thinking about lines that work together after we had sort of chatted a little bit and sort of decided that we were going to talk about lines that cross over,
Mhm.
I started thinking of, imagine an ape riding one of these things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was like my one thing about these, my sort of nitpick is that they're aesthetically a little bit more not cartoony, but there's just sort of something about them that's a little bit
They're
less.
more extreme. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
I thought, some of these other lines actually tie really well to this. And so I
Yeah.
imagine, imagine Kali, the badass,
Mm.
ape baddie on, a big nasty black wolf.
Yeah.
That's
Or they also have Animal Warriors has that feline that's, I think, probably based off of lynx from the shape of the ears and the face,
Mhm.
but it has the same bobbed ears that the D20 wolf does.
Yep,
So to have him on top of that would be kind of cool too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, take your pick. Like Charlie's kind of saying, right? Like,
Yeah.
come up with your own combos. Like, grab
Yeah.
what works for you. Colin says, I agree. I was looking at the Ranger Special Ops Soldier for Cosmic. I just ordered the Scarab and Swarm Action Force Troopers for Mike just this week to integrate with Cosmic. Oh, that's interesting. That didn't even cross my mind, because I always think
That's
of Action Force as like a classified sort of yin and yang in some ways. So
yeah, I mean, that's, I got the scarabs, and I ordered the swarm and stuff too, but like the mythic league, cosmic legions, like I said, that's like my easy second criteria to order those things, because they're going to be perfect for it. Like they're perfect. Like I think that they're going to be just great all the way around for that line.
yeah, I agreed. I mean, and it's so funny, right? Because like as you know, because you sort of are doing dios and you're doing different stuff with your photography, we are all, I shouldn't say we are all, but a lot of us, always have our head on a swivel, and we're always looking at like, what can I do with this? What can I do with this? Would this fit? Does this scale right? How does this integrate? How can
Yep.
I kind of take something that is a sort of that is sort of a in the periphery, and make it work for my collection or on my shelf or in my photographs or what have you.
Yep.
um and this came up recently, and I thought this is fantastic, and I started sort of looking at this line, and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder. Jim, this one is for you, buddy. The Jurassic World, or the Jurassic Park, now
Yep.
the Hammer collection, which is scales a little bit smaller than some of the previous lines, but I still think it works, because I think a lot of times dinosaurs, they don't actually scale them accurately anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You kind of pick and choose what works best for you. I'm almost looking at a couple of these as like mounts for different lines, for different figures, for stuff like that.
That one, I guess the second row down to the far left. I'm not even going to attempt the name. Um, but yeah, the guy on the left next to, yeah, him. Um, this guy here, I think, is going to be a really great pair up, either with Mythic Legions or with 118. But if you take a look at this, the joints in this is probably the best I've ever seen from any Jurassic Park
Mm-hmm.
release. Like, he's got everything. Like normally those things, I've got one T-Rex, like a, not the really big one, but like the one down from that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty good. But this thing, it's got everything. Like, it's like, I think the legs have about four joints. I think the arms have about three. It's got a midsection joint. It's got two in the neck. It's got a swivel head. Even the tail is jointed. Like, you're gonna like you could put this together up against like a barbarian or something, because they're probably going to stand about the same height. So you're going to be able to approximate like some awesome sort of Frazetta type scene from that. Um, for a mount, yeah, you could probably do it for a mount, but I think more as adversaries, these are going to work
Sure.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
really well, really
Yeah.
well.
And Mike is mentioning too that D20 is doing a whole lot of figures to go with a slew of different mounts. So yeah, we've seen the wolf,
Yeah.
but they've got. They've basically said that they're doing 5 or 6 different mounts, and then essentially like figures that sort of coincide with all the different mounts. Like there's kind of
Wow.
or whatever. Which again, um, assuming that they sort of scale the same as another line. Like it's just we're spoiled for choice now. Like it's the hard part now is deciding what you don't get.
Yeah.
Like like you said, like where do you sort of put the brakes on?
Yeah.
Jim said they just announced the T-Rex 24 inches. So is that the same size as the super colossal T-Rex that they've had? They've had sort of year over year, they've had a different sort of version of that T-Rex. And I've almost pulled the trigger a couple times. It's just always been like out of stock on the day that I decide that I want it. And then back in stock next week. And I'm like, nah, I bought something else this week and I'll have to wait. But
And where do you put it? It's massive. Where do you put that thing?
kids' room.
Put it in the garage.
It, but I mean,
Yeah.
but I agree. I mean, the articulation on these is pretty phenomenal, and especially like I mean, $33 for that one. Some of the other ones are like $30. Even
Yeah.
that super colossal T-Rex is like $60-70. Like they're
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Grab a couple and sort of add them in. And if you don't love them, you're not kicking yourself for getting them. But
Yeah.
are the bigger Raptors still in production? I can only assume that you mean the Amber Collection ones that came out sort of a year or two ago. I don't know. They're still out and about. Like you see them still out in shops sometimes. I think you could probably find some, but
I think Jim said that the Amber collection has been discontinued, and those were the 6-inch
okay,
Raptors.
okay. So they may have been discontinued, but you might still be able to find one. There might be stock kicking around just because it's discontinued. It's not like other lines, right? Where when it's discontinued, you'll never see it again. That just means they're not making more. They might have a warehouse full of that stuff.
Yeah.
Miko says, really like those wolves, perfect for greenskins. Yes, they are. I mean, they look fantastic with an orc on them. Like that's such a great combo, right? Orcs on wolf mounts. Miko said boar is coming next. Yes, which looks fantastic with dwarves. So it's kind of like, you wait until the mount for your preferred mythos race pops up.
That's like a Dane Ironfoot kind of thing, right? To have him on the boar, is from what I recall.
Kelly says, speaking on mixing lines, 5K Toys has a big red demon dude and his big ass orcs on the way. Yes, yeah. They kind of look like a World of Warcraft orc almost. Like they kind of upscaled them and kind of made them bigger and chunkier and thicker. Mike said, asked about those too. We'll have them pending finance making sense. They're essentially orcs with Storm Collectibles bodies by the looks of it. Yeah, it looks like they're just really chunky orcs, and it looks like they'll fit almost perfect.
Well, wasn't it 5K Toys who has that new Mr. Hyde coming out, who looks like he's eaten about like 500 bottles of steroids, like he's just massive? I think that's 5K who's doing him too.
I don't know. Like it's funny because at this point it's like it's so hard to keep track, and so many things start similar. And then you also have a bunch of the lines out of Asia, right? Where like there's a factory, and that factory essentially has 4 companies.
Yeah.
And they're all like that 5K orc. It's a Storm Collectibles body. Like when you look at the articulation of like the butterfly joints and the shoulders and stuff,
Yeah.
it's oddly familiar. So it does make you wonder, like how how many of these companies are just sort of subsidiaries or like offshoots because they maybe they have marketing teams for sort of one brand and a marketing team for another, and so they kind of show up as a different brand or out.
And it
It's
can also be too that, sometimes, sometimes when you get different companies based out of China where intellectual, like, people always give the Chinese a hard time. The Chinese companies a hard time for, like, stealing, intellectual properties, to incorporate in their own. Um, that's reduced a lot lately, but where it hasn't, there's not much enforcement, is Chinese companies stealing from one another.
Mhm.
That's quite rampant. So if you do see like similarities, particularly in the 118 stuff, between like Acid World, Acid Rain World, and like Joy Toy. Like, you'll see some stuff where, like, like they fire stuff to market so fast, but you see
High.
some of them and you're kind of like getting cross-eyed because they're, I think they're kind of like they're pilfering one another's designs in some ways. So
You go
yeah.
looking at a product that you thought was one brand, and you're like, no, wait, it's this brand. Oh, wait, it's
Yeah, yeah,
a line. Like, how do you keep track?
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just so much. Um, Eddie, who we all know and love. Eddie is in our group chat. It feels like every day Eddie says golden age of toys.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Because
And
Eddie
he's right. He's totally
Eddie is
right.
also the Mr. Everything collector. He's got, a couple figures from every line, and he's always sort of jumping on sort of something new and something different and something that fits. And then we see it in all his photography as well. So it's
And
fantastic.
just great shots. Like, I mean, he's got a real eye for it, and, like, he's got a great sense of color, like
Mhm.
how to combine some of the stuff. And just as we were talking about before, like, he mixes it up all the time, and it turns out great. It's really rewarding to see his stuff.
And he shoots like every day. Like
Oh yeah,
he's
yeah.
posting stuff in the group, and every day he's posting stuff to different groups, right? Like whether it's the import group, whether it's Knights, whether it's the GI Joe group, whether it's there's probably other groups that I'm not even in that he's posting in.
He's posting like at least two things to, like, the ACBA group, like, every day. So yeah,
Good on him. I mean
yeah.
he's having fun, and that's what it's all about, right? So well, we're just over an hour. That was sort of all the lines that I had thought of. Is there any lines, Greg, that you can think of, or is there any lines that we didn't sort of talk about that anybody that's hanging out with us and chatting with us want to fire in the comments there? We can kind of touch on, or
Um, no, the only thing is, like you mentioned, McFarlane, and
Mhm.
there is, like, with the mega figures they've been releasing
Mhm.
lately. There's some of them which I think can do, like, I've seen people use that Cygor, that, giant ape
Mhm.
thing for it. Now he's too techno for Mythic Legions, but for Cosmic Legions he would be incredible.
Yeah,
Because he's massive.
yeah.
So there's that. They're also coming out with a Solomon Grundy, which I think, sort of, you actually could use more for Mythic Legions customs. But he's huge too. And I think too, like, we're finding now that a lot of the mainstream lines, they're also tweaking up their their product. They're offering something in a larger size. Like, there's an Ulik that Mike just put up on the site for Marvel
Yep.
Legends. He's perfect. Like, he looks amazing. And I think that you could, with one head is a little bit comic oriented, but the other one though, and with the weapons and the armor that he's wearing, I think you could easily fold that in. So, and I
Mhm.
think, like, in Star Wars Black, they're doing some stuff there too, which could translate over to Cosmic. But again, you really have to pick and choose with that, mostly because of scale. But yeah, I think there's options there all the way around. So
Jim mentions the Power Rangers Lightning Collection, some of the villains monsters like the Tanga. Yeah,
yep.
there's definitely some. There's definitely and it's preference too, right? Like that's the other thing. You can buy a couple from a couple different lines, and you know, whatever works for you. Um, you know, get down with yourself, man. Do what you love. Do what works for you. Mike says Cygor is coming in this week. The Tech Spawn Gorilla. This line that Mike and I have talked about, and I forgot to mention this one, but I've pulled it up so we can sort of show it. Mike said, "Did you guys look at Stardusk?" So Stardusk is sort of in Kickstarter now, but I believe, and Mike, you know, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. Mike is going to be getting these as well. But Stardusk is from the Toy Forge guys, which are
Oh yeah.
it's guys that we're all familiar with through they do Mythic Legion's custom parts.
Hmm.
It's sort of a sci-fi 6-inch scale line, you know, which could also sort of fill in your sort of humanoid element to sort of your troop building in Cosmic. This guy to me looks like a Cylon. Am I the only one? Is that like
The first guy you had looked like Metroid.
oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
just
Them. Yeah.
oh, that guy. Yo, for sure. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Red suit. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And it's Toy Forge, so you can only assume that sort of, again, in the same way that like Savage Crucible sort of knows what they're doing in terms of
Hmm.
mixing it, or maybe this guy's even more Cylon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can only assume that sort of, and then these again, a lot of these lines, right, that are sort of guys that did Mythic custom stuff, they're kind of going above and beyond what
Yep.
Four Horsemen do in terms of articulation, in terms of certain other aspects, which I think is cool. I think it's an interesting sort of way to go to and then again, you know, they sort of show scaling with other lines. And
Can I just say too, one thing that's kind of interesting is that I'm really curious on all these lines. When it comes to articulation, sort of how they're going to work out. Like, you know, we see these like these articulation videos that they run.
mm-hmm.
You know, and they do those exploded views like you just had there. And I think it's actually kind of fun to see how these different companies have come up with ways for the figures to move and to be realistic and to not break up, you know, the paint apps or, you know, the sculpt or all that kind of thing. Because, you know, people have said this often before, like you look at like Mythic Legions, like their articulation buck actually is quite dated, for lack of a better word, right? When you compare against what's come out in the last kind of 5 years. But it's always really interesting because you see that Trevor says this often, you know, that despite them not having 28 joints, they still able to move in a way that they look really good, right? And you don't necessarily need all this blown out articulation to have something that looks really good posed on the shelf or in a photo or whatever. So when I look at all these lines that we're talking about tonight, it's going to be fun to see when they're in hand, sort of how they move around and what decisions were made by, you know, look versus function, right?
Yeah,
So I think it's going to be a blast.
I always yeah, I'm always surprised by some that have like, you know, Mythic Legions has less points of articulation than a lot of lines, but like you said, the way that they use the articulation
Yeah,
makes it very, very posable.
yeah.
Like surprisingly posable, given that
I know it boggles my mind. Like,
yeah,
like why does this work?
it's weird because it seems dated, but nobody's nobody else has used the sort of articulation scheme that they have in terms of where they are, especially with the legs. Where they articulate the legs is in what kind of seems like weird spots, but then you pose them up and you're
Yeah.
like, this really works.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I remember, like, the first, I still have it. This is one of the very few figures that I still have from my childhood. But one of the first, like, super articulated figures that I ever got was
Yeah.
the super articulated Spider-Man. And
Yeah. Yeah.
his posing is brutal. It was
Yeah.
like so far ahead of anything else. Like, I think at the time, all the other Marvel figures were like 5 POA.
Yeah.
Uh, they might have been 6 because they might have had a pivot at the waist.
Yeah.
Remember? Maybe it was more because they had knee articulation. Oh no, they had more because they had knee, elbow, shoulder, hip, head, and then I think some had waist. But then, like, you got articulation in the ankle, and you got, like, his leg could go out instead of just,
Yeah.
and like the wrists could go up and down. But they got these big, I don't know if you can sort of see it on there, these big metal rivets, and he's like, in a weird way, we haven't come that far. I mean, we're just getting to
No.
pinless joints, like, what,
Yeah.
30 years after this figure came out? Like, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Although that said, I mean, some of the pinless joints that they're doing now, for different lines, whether that's my favorite GI Joe Classified, or
Yeah.
I actually ordered a couple of the Marvel. I'm kind of. I mean, I have a lot of Legends on my shelf, but I haven't been buying a lot of them.
Mhm.
But I had to order those pinless Spider-Man figures that came up. Price,
That Ben
uh,
Riley
yeah,
is gorgeous. Like I have so much like this guy, man. Like, come on, like when he sits there like that, and you're
mhm.
not even thinking about it. Yeah, come on, perfect, awesome.
It's the golden age.
Yep.
To quote my,
You know that every time you say that, you gotta pay Eddie $5. So try to keep it, to a
yeah,
three mention minimum.
he gets a kickback in some form or another. I think I'm obligated to like all of his pictures that he posts. I think that's sort of the
I do that anyway. So
yeah. So do I. I mean, I have a hard time. Like, I love almost all of them. It's the ones where it's like the content where I'm like, I don't like that figure. I'll only like this one. Charlie makes a good point. And I think he's talking about the Four Horsemen stuff. They don't articulate well, but they can sure pose.
Yeah, it's so
Absolutely.
true. It's
Yeah.
so true.
And Kelly says every time somebody says golden age, Eddie gets a timid.
Yeah, but it's one of those jelly filled ones that nobody likes. So
Yeah, it's whatever at the end of the night. Well, that's gonna do it for us, guys. We're an hour and 15 minutes, which is a little over what we sort of shoot for, but I mean, still pretty good. It's still pretty good. I thought we could potentially go a lot longer, so I'm glad we sort of contained. Um, any last things you wanna throw out there, Greg? Or
No, not too much. I think yeah, I mean there's something I kind of had in mind, but I think it's something I sort of want to pitch to a couple people and see if they're interested in as like a collaborative thing. So just as like a teaser, it's
I'm
kind of
intrigued.
something. Sorry.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's something. Well, hey, why not just throw it out there? Something we used to do in the Lego community was called the Starfighter telephone game. And basically, what you do is you build a starfighter, choose 300 parts or whatever, and you take it. You've got a group of about 10 people, whatever. You build it, you mail it to the next guy. He
Okay.
gets it, and then he keeps it, and then builds something based on it, but his version of that, mail it to
Okay.
the next guy, all the way around the group, right?
Yeah.
Well, the next wave that comes out, I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if everyone did like maybe like, you know, you buy a couple fodder pieces or something like that. You do a custom, whether it's like, you know, a custom piece, can be a custom paint,
Mhm.
can be soft goods, you know, you can mix and match with some parts from other fodder you may have kicking around. You mail it to the next guy. The next guy does the same thing. He keeps that big, but then with when he does the, you know, to the next guy. So be kind of cool. Be kind of neat to see what people come up with. And then of course, you know, everyone posts what they receive.
Mhm.
So yeah. So maybe it's something to consider. You know,
I love.
unfortunately, it's a little pricey just because, you know, these aren't cheap figures, so it may not be for everyone. But I think it could be fun.
Yeah, people can opt in, people can opt
Yeah.
out. No, I think that's kind of the thing is that like that's I love that idea. I gotta say, there's in a GI Joe group that I'm in, there's actually a thing called Operation Kit Bash, where there's a
Yeah.
whole box full of vintage GI Joe parts that gets shipped
Yeah.
from one guy to the next. You create however many figures you want out of the parts that are in the box and essentially add, you know, the equivalent or more to the
Yep.
box and ship it to the next guy on the list. That sounds like it's exactly the same thing, but
Yep.
with legions. I love it. It's right up my alley. There's a couple other things like that that I want to do. That one might make more sense than the one that I sort of had in mind, but we'll see. Um, I did want to ask you, Greg. We could save it for later, but because you bring up Lego Starfighters, what do you think of the Toy Story, the Buzz Lightyear ship that
You
comes?
mean the one that's arriving tomorrow?
So
It's
you don't get
amazing.
it
It's yeah, it's phenomenal.
I
It's
only saw
probably
it
the
and it looks fantastic. It looks
it's
like
probably the best. It's the best spaceship they built, even including all the Star Wars stuff in like 15 years. It looks amazing.
it looks.
So
I mean, I don't know who's designing that line, but like that's super creative. Like some of the techniques. Well, whatever. We won't bore people with Lego talk in
yeah.
the Legions group, but yeah, it looks fantastic. But anyway, I'm just going to sort of close things up here. Big shout out to Mike, E Collectibles, as we all know, awesome dude, great to deal with, great stuff. He was teasing me with pictures of the extreme sets that he is going to be adding to the website. If you guys don't know what extreme sets are, they
Oh,
are like the most amazing cardboard sort of prefabbed dio. And if you have no sort of inclination to do anything creative, but you want a cool dio for your figures, these things are it.
I
You
I use them all the time. All the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like you can pull it out of the box, put it together, and it looks fantastic. You can add 3D elements, you can add sort of your own touch to it, and really put them over the top. I'm going to be grabbing a couple. I've been hounding Mike to get these for months. Really looking forward to them. Um,
And
check.
as far as I know, because I've searched all the been searching all the time for them, I don't think there's any other distributors in Canada that I've found. So he could be, for the moment, the only or one of the very few Canadian.
I think there's well there's one online store that nobody cares to talk about, and when they do, they
Exactly.
talk disparagingly about him. Um,
Exactly.
I think they're out there a little bit, but I think Mike's probably going to be the go-to guy for these very
Yeah.
quickly, based on what I've sort of seen that he's intending to get. So,
Well,
uh,
Adam, I got to tell you, when he sent me an instant message with a link to the post, I literally squealed out loud
yeah.
because I'm so thrilled about it. It's awesome. So
And he's banged on about it in the comments here. I didn't bring it up because I knew that I was going to talk about it. But he's saying extreme set tomorrow, and then he and Kelly went back and forth with a bunch of nonsense. Charlie says E Collectibles is the Canadian store. Charlie, I don't disagree with you, and I think it's I also have some of the insider information about some of the stuff that he's working on, and it's there's going to be some cool stuff coming, guys. Charles said, got to get those shipping containers for sure. The shipping containers. There's the
Oh
like
yeah.
crates. For Mythic, you know, you've got the dungeon, you've got the castle. They do a cabin, which is really really cool, which I think could probably squeeze in there. The cabin looks great for like dreadnoughts for classic.
Dreadnoughts. Yeah. Yeah.
But then they've got like for cosmic, they've got the I can never remember the name, but they're sort of like a sci-fi futuristic street. There's a bunch of like bases, like sci-fi kind of bases. Sector 7, I think, is probably the one
Yep.
that most people use. I think that one's fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Like the one that I have is the 2 tunnel pieces. I think it's actually called a sewer. And it's like I use it all the time because it comes with the 2.
Yeah, they're cardboard, but they're 3D. Like there's
Yeah.
like an element where there's sort of
It's
doors.
like
Yeah.
just 2 things, right? So you can kind of like, but you can put them together for like a long tunnel. You put them at an angle to have things. Like I use them for like Joe Warhammer. I've used it actually for Mythic Legions too, just because if you put it far enough in the background, it actually looks like a castle wall because the graffiti all goes at a focus and whatever. So yeah, man, and like they're high quality. Like the prints too are like a 3D print. So I've seen for Mythics, particularly, I've seen for the castle wall. And then they like if you put them far enough back and you don't put them at an angle, perfect.
You did I think I hope it was you because I remember it being you. You did a great one with from the Batman, right? Where he was at the like
Yeah,
that tunnel.
yeah, and like the half shadow was coming through, and like, oh yeah, it's like it's yeah, they're fantastic. Like I'm really a big fan of them. Is sorry Ray, if you're watching this at some point, I love your stuff. 3D still looks awesome. Like, it's still like the gold standard. But if you don't have your skills and time, these are great. So yeah.
They're fantastic, and I mean for the price for what you get, they're massive. Like they're huge.
Yeah.
The pictures don't do them justice. They're very
No.
very big. They're very well made. Get one, and if you don't love it, Mike will give you a full refund.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that scream
Maybe
you heard was all the way from Eastern Ontario. So.
I don't. Okay, that's not. We'll finalize whether that's true or not. But Mike said extreme sets are only necessary until Ray gets up to speed. Yeah, so, I mean, it's until we're all just fabricating like these elaborate. I don't even think he's done like a medieval sort of castle kind of church thing with like stained glass that I don't even think he's posted that one yet. It's like
I haven't
3
seen
feet
that.
tall
Yeah.
and like 6 feet long. It's huge. Like it's crazy.
And like what cracks me up too is like, we chat back and forth and stuff. And he mentioned the other day, he's like, all this stuff is magnetized so he can take it down and work on it, whatever. But he's working on his kitchen table. And I just have this like picture of like, like these, like it's like overtaking the kids, right? And the kids are like crawling inside of it and stuff because I'm like, because they're huge. Like that building that he's working on now, you don't get a sense of it until he actually started to put the Joe figs on it. I'm like, you could rent this out as like a condo unit. It's massive. It's so big.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, the stuff that Ray's doing is fantastic. He's inspired me to get into doing dials, so I sort of made space in my garage to like fit, and I got big chunks of styrofoam insulation, and like I'm all in, but I just don't have the time. Anyways, but I think maybe Mike has kiboshed the full refund, so we'll figure that out. But honestly, if you get one and you don't love it, there's something wrong with you. You can kick rocks because they're phenomenal. But
Well, if you get one and you don't love it, you can sell it to me for half price because I'll take it right off your hands.
well,
So
that's the other thing. You yeah, post it in the group, and I'm sure somebody will take
yeah.
it off. So, but yeah, on that note, get over to eCollectibles and order everything. If you haven't gotten to the Alithia wave, you're nuts. But you're lucky enough that you do still have a little bit of time. Hit Mike up, let him know what you need, what you want. I know that he's being sneaky and kind of holding a couple things back that may look sold out, but they might still be available if you ask nice. And buy them bets.
And someone we were talking before, if anyone in the audience has Atticus Doom from Mezco, go buy some vampires from the Alithia wave because they match up perfectly. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Mike says the Americans are coming for it. So yes, that's they once they sort of exhaust all the options south of the border, they're going to be coming for this stuff. So don't sleep on it. Don't wait till it is actually delivered and Mike can't get any more. Order it now, like right now. As soon as this video is over, go on eCollectibles and get your order in. Greg, it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. We'll do this again sometime, I'm sure.
Please, man, please. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a blast.
Thank you all of you guys for joining, for commenting, for participating. It makes doing these videos a ton of fun, and I will see you guys again probably sooner rather than later. Like I said, I'm signing off for May, but don't be surprised if I make a guest appearance or two. Thank you all, and have a great weekend. Good night.